Here. Madam Clerk, thank you. Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Okay, Madam Clerk, certification of compliance with open meetings law, please. Thank you. Meeting agenda has been presented. Number 7, public comment. Anybody here that would like to address the board on any issue that is not on the agenda, you may do so now. If you would like to speak during that agenda item, I will call on you at that time. Alex, is there anybody online? Hand up. Gene, go ahead, Gene. We are in public comment. State your name, address, and you get 3 minutes, ma'am.
Actually, it is an agenda item, so I will wait if you will allow me to speak at that time.
Okay, what agenda item?
It's the rezoning of the Hathaway application.
Okay, thank you. We'll call on you then. Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, if not, we'll move on then to number 8, approval of meeting minutes, April 21, 22. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Mr. Duffy?
I move.
Okay, Mr. Helwig, second. Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Mr. Helwig to approve our meeting minutes of April 21, 2022 as presented. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, number 9, appointment of a 3rd member to our Labor Negotiations Board. We omitted this. Ron Kinsley sat on it previously, and I would highly recommend that we add Mr. Ron Kinsley to our 3rd member to the Labor Negotiations Board. I'll entertain a motion at this time. Motion by Mr. Schleter, second by Mr. Peters, to add Mr. Ron Kinsley as our 3rd member to the Labor Negotiations Board. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Zoning Committee. Mr. Betcher, Chair report, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the zoning committee held its monthly public hearing on Friday, April 22nd. Elections were held for chair and vice chair. We had 2 contentious rezone requests, but due to having 2 new members, we were advised by council to have them abstain from voting, leaving us with just 4 voting members. That resulted in 1 rezone request failing by 1 to 3 vote, and the other resulting in a tie 2 to 2 vote. We also heard and voted on 4 conditional use permits, 2 CUP renewals, and 1 special event application. We expect to have a final draft of ordinance changes regarding accessory structures on vacant land at our zoning committee tomorrow morning. Pending your questions, I will turn it over to Mr. Kozlowski to present the cases.
Thank you.
Thank you. First case we have tonight is rezone number 22-002, Hathaway Lodge LLC. Steve Frenshu, the owner. This is in the town of Edgewater. Legal description, part of government lot 4, section 20, township 38 north, range 9 west. It's 18.9 total acres, zone forestry 1. The purpose of the request is to rezone this 18.9 acres of forestry 1, the underlying zone district, to residential recreational 1. The included 3.47 acres of shoreline wetland is not to be affected in this rezoning. The purpose of the rezone to RR1 is then to divide this lot into smaller lakeshore lots for cottages. Before getting into the actual summary and project history for this request, I do want to bring up that this case did result in that 2-2 tie vote. That zoning committee was unable to reach a decision and a recommendation to the County Board of Supervisors. With that information, it is legal counsel's recommendation, the zoning committee chairman's recommendation, and myself that county board would remand this decision back to zoning committee for a reconsideration and to hold another public hearing process as to bring this back to the board with a recommendation. At this time, the case will come back with either a recommendation for approval or denial. Without getting into the case, I would be looking for a motion to remand that back. If you want to hear the additional case information, I can go through it at this time.
No, Mr. Hellwig,
I would make a motion that it goes back to the.
remand
zoning
it back to the zoning committee. Okay. Ms. Hessel,
I think he beat me to it.
ladies first, second by Ms. Hessel. Motion by Mr. Hellwig, second by Ms. Hessel. Oh, no, it's the other one. I'm sorry. They're not gonna talk on the other one. Okay, motion by Mr. Hellwig, second by Ms. Hessel to remand rezone number 22-002 back to the zoning committee for reconsideration.
Yeah, it would be as reconsideration as a new public hearing as to reach a decision.
Got it. Okay, is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Buckholz?
Mr. Kozlowski, and looking at this rezone, did we get any information back on council? Can we legally do this?
Yeah, it was legal counsel's recommendation that we do this. And per your bylaws, the way that it would work and zoning committee's bylaws, a remand decision by this board can kick it back to zoning committee. That process is laid out in the zoning committee bylaws, and at that point does require a separate and new public hearing process.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, it's Rule 9.4 of the zoning committee's bylaws that allows this board to essentially ask the zoning committee to reconsider, and in doing so, it would require a new public hearing.
Great. Oh, we should, can you introduce yourself, sir?
I'm sorry, Andy Phillips.
Thank you. And you'll be available for most of the meeting, correct?
All of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I have a motion by Mr. Hellwig, second by Ms. Hessel to remand this rezone number 22-002 back to the zoning committee. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor,
I would like
signify
to
by saying
speak.
aye.
I would like to speak, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jean, you wanted to speak on this?
Yes, exactly. Specifically this, yes. I'll make it short. Gina
Okay.
Cola, 363. Do you need to say something first?
No, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed you.
Okay. My name is Gina Cola, 3634 and Boxing Camp Trail, Stone Lake, Wisconsin. I live on Little Sisabagama, where this land is in question. I have a comment regarding this item, and I'd like to bring to your attention that there has been a petition already submitted by 100% of the neighbors sharing borders with this parcel that are in opposition to this rezone. In addition, the vast majority, if not all of the neighbors within 300 feet are in opposition to it. And that is on the grounds that this land is rife with environmentally sensitive wetlands. And I just also want to mention or remind us all that your own Sawyer County Shoreland Wetland Protection Ordinance of January 2019 states in item 3.2, the purpose of this district is created to maintain safe and healthful conditions, to prevent water pollution, to protect fish spawning grounds and wildlife habitat, to preserve shore cover and natural beauty, and to control building and development in wetlands whenever possible. This parcel is not suited to concentrated development, although the applicant is not presenting any plans. The rezoning to RR1 will most likely result in high incidence of easements and variances, negating the intent of your own ordinances. So the zoning office, as you heard, and the legal counsel recommended this application go back to the zoning committee for a rehearing. Instead, I ask that you just simply deny the rezone application. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Hellwig, second by Ms. Hessel to remand this rezone 22-002 back to the zoning committee. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Hessel? Oh, I thought he did. Okay. You want to do that, Andy?
Yeah, Andy Phillips is our legal counsel from Coastal.
Okay. So I got a motion and a second on the floor. Yeah. Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, remanded back to zoning.
Yes.
Are we on letter C then? No.
Yes, next case is rezone number 22-006, owner Rogers and Renee Severs, Town of Lenroot, part of the northwest one quarter, the southwest one quarter, section 21, Township 42 North, Range 9 West, 8.7 total acres, zone forestry 1, including 0.25 acres of shoreline wetland that is not to be affected in this rezoning. The F1 zone district requirements would need a minimum of 5 acres and 300 feet of width. Thus, the zone district change is being requested. The Town of Lenroot Comprehensive Plan map shows this area as forestry residential. Forestry residential is defined by the Town of Lenroot Comprehensive Plans, are areas within the town that they are expected to see growth in residential development and anticipated to see this activity continue. In order to protect natural resources bases and promote low density development, it is recommended that the development be limited to acre sizes of 5 acres with 1 single family dwelling and no further subdivision. The anticipated lot size of this rezone would be 3 lots, approximately 2 to 3 acres per lot. While that is not what the comprehensive plan recognizes for recommendation, it should be noted that there are other lots along Jolly Fisherman Road and Minnesota Ridge Lane that are already less than the 5 acre minimum recommendations. The property, if the property was rezoned to residential recreational 1, the minimum lot sizes would be 100 feet of width and 200 feet of depth. The surrounding land use is mixed forestry 1 and residential. There were 13 opinion letters sent out to property owners within 300 feet. 7 were returned with objections. The Town of Lenroot denied the rezone request on April 11th at their town board meeting with no additional comments submitted. At the Sawyer County Zoning Committee public hearing on April 22nd, it was recommended for denial to the county board of a vote of 3-1 with the findings of facts that it would be create topographical problems such as runoff, drainage, erosion, flooding, or vegetative cover removal, and it would not be consistent with the town and or comprehensive plan.
Okay, and I have 2 signed up for public comment on this rezone, correct? We'll start with Pamela Niska, please. You have 3 minutes. State your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Pamela Niska, and I own 13027 North Minnesota Ridge Lane in Hayward. That's on Nelson Lake. Upon notification of the proposed rezone application, the Minnesota Ridge Lane neighbors met and discussed their objections. 10 letters of objection with related materials and photos were submitted to the Lenroot Town Board and also provided to the County Zoning Department and Committee. Those same 10 letters and all the related material have been provided to you for this meeting. Mr. Max Lindsay, an attorney who specializes in zoning issues, was retained to represent all the neighbors due to the critical nature of their objections. Objections to this rezone application include creating incongruous parcel use, requiring an exhaustive amount of deforestation and grading, having an adverse impact on neighboring Minnesota Ridge property values, the grading adversely impacting the watershed as the increased impervious surfaces would create substantial runoff, adversely impacting the water table, which is already exhibiting signs of stress, increasing the number of structures on the private road by 25% and doubling the tenants and traffic. Also, the Minnesota Ridge neighbors have no guarantees the Severs will not sell 1 or 2 of the parcels with structures on them post-construction. Minnesota Ridge property owners are older, professional, or retired. The rezone would bring a commercial-like atmosphere to the current peaceful Northwoods quality of life. It's akin to being a commercial property under the guise of residential ownership. 10 of the neighbors attended the April 11th Lenroot Town Board. Minutes from that meeting note receiving many objection letters, and that several homeowners from Minnesota Ridge attended the meeting to explain their objections to Mr. Severs building 3 homes on the property. They had no objection to the construction of 1 home on the property. All objections were in regard to constructing that many new structures on the property, resulting in devastating the land area, deforestation, adverse impacts on the water table, water runoff, and increased traffic. The town board unanimously denied the rezone application and sent the recommendation for denial to the county zoning committee. We have a cassette tape of the Lenroot Town Board meeting, which we are very happy to turn over to this county board. In comments during the April 22nd zoning committee, the committee chair noted that the town boards performed due diligence and this town board voted unanimously against the rezone. The chair said they should take the town's denial recommendation seriously. The chair also noted the amount of excavation required and said there would be too much of a change to the local topography and aesthetics of the area. As you know, the zoning committee voted 3-1 to disapprove the rezone application, and Mr. Kozlowski stated the reasons for stating the denial of the rezone.
Okay, can you wrap it up, man?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, next I have a Ross Mayor. Mayor? Please state your name and address, sir.
Good evening. My name is Ross Mayer. I'm at 13027N Minnesota Ridge. The parcel involved in this rezone application is along Minnesota Ridge Lane, which is located just off Jolly Fisherman on Nelson Lake. Minnesota Ridge Lane, it's a private road. It is also a dividing line between RR1 parcels and F1 parcels. In 1984, I was the first property owner to clear land and build a family cabin along Minnesota Ridge. Minnesota Ridge runs along with Hard Rock Circle, and there's a lot of huge boulders and rock fields coming across from the lake from them. Our neighbors and ourselves in doing construction around there have ran into a lot of big boulders, so there's some hidden surprises in the ground around there. The rezone application is bordered by county land on the north and on the east. The parcel is bordered to the south and west by 12 residential properties with 24 listed property owners. Each property along Minnesota Ridge has a home, a garage, some of them have sheds. 8 of the 12 property owners also have F1 zone parcels on the north side of Minnesota Ridge Lane, which is the border to Seavers F1 parcel. This rezone parcel has no flat spots. It's full of peaks and valleys. It's one of the highest points on Nelson Lake. The proposed rezone is roughly the size of a football field. A substantial number of trees would need to be taken out for them to accomplish the flat spot that they want to build. And then they'd also have to move a ton of earth to build a land bridge over a ravine. The open land will remove trees and vegetation that once slowed rainwater and snowmelt runoff. The graded land and new structures will have new impervious surfaces, creating concentrated runoff. The new runoff will flow into the surrounding lowlands areas, creating pooling of stagnant water on both county and private land. There is concern that the grading will run to runoff being diverted down Minnesota Ridge, causing property damage to those on the lowest points along the private road, and also with water running into Nelson Lake. I'm a former construction company owner. I built many houses
Can
and
you wrap it up,
developed
sir,
land.
please?
Yep. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, is there any other public comment on this rezone? Yep. Go ahead, sir. Do you have him, Alex? Okay. State your name and address, sir, for us, please. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, and I assume you're talking to me, Max Lindsay. I am an attorney hired by landowners surrounding this property. Address is 220 6th Avenue West in Ashland, Wisconsin. I don't need to reiterate all of the points that the neighbors have previously presented. Just requesting the county board to recognize the importance and the consideration that the town of Leonard's town board took in this and unanimously denying this request. And then as well, the zoning committee at their public hearing considering this and recommending denial of this request. And this request isn't just for the construction of 3 family homes or family cabins. It's for a complete rezone of this parcel. Nothing would limit, if this were granted, nothing would limit the property owner or a subsequent property owner from further subdividing and developing. This lot size in total, if it were zoned, the RR1, would allow for actually up to 6 or 7 parcels to fit within this area. So while the zoning report and the application said the desired development is 3 properties, nothing would prevent them from constructing more. In addition to that, we just, again, request that you consider the town of Leonard's position and the zoning committee's position and adopt the recommendation denying this rezone request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Jay, just let me confirm then the town of Leonard board denied this along with the zoning committee, correct?
Yes, they made the recommendation
Okay.
for denial.
Thank you. Mr. Buckholz.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to deny rezone number 22-006.
Mr. Betcher.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Mr. Buckholz, second by Mr. Betcher to deny the rezone 22-006. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I would just like
Mr. Betcher,
to,
yes, sir.
maybe I need to clarify a couple comments from the zoning committee. I made a comment that I am a big proponent of personal property rights. And I stand by that, but not if it's going to be at the detriment or infringement of neighboring property rights. Not if it's going to be at the detriment of, to ecology, wildlife, wetland, and create an objectionable view. So I just wanted to clarify that because I made a statement also that, I want to say yes, but that doesn't exclude the fact that the property owner the burden of proof lies with them. So in this case, we recommended to disapprove this. That's all I have.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Mr. Betcher, does that conclude your report then, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Okay, number 11, Public Safety Committee Chair Report. Mr. Buckholz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had our public safety meeting last Thursday, and we had our elections of officer, and I was elected chair, and Mr. Helwig was elected vice chair.
Congrats.
Chief Sedera advised that they are down 2 full-time dispatchers, have 2 applicants in training and 2 more applicants scheduled for shadowing. They are purchasing hands-free headsets for the dispatchers. Lieutenant Rapinski advised that the calls decreased slightly compared to last year. He also congratulated Deputy Jordan Price in being promoted from dispatch to full-time patrol. Communication specialist report from Mr. Crux said all equipment is now in, and we are waiting to secure some tower climbers. They hope installation will happen by the end of the month. Jail report, Sheriff Marotek reported that vacancies in the jail advised that they are not receiving applicants for these positions. Animal control report, the new AC officer will begin work on May 23rd with position sharing time, 25% zoning, 25% health and human services, and 50% animal control. Emergency department, a written report was provided by Mr. Dunson and advised that the airport EMS training is taking place soon. And the department is reviewing its hazmat grant applications opportunity, and the billing backlog has been completed as invoices are going out. And Justice Coordinating Council, I'll leave that up to Andy. That ends my report, Mr. Chairman.
Wonderful. So do we have a CJCC report then? And Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Helwig, can we ask for that from you in the future?
Okay.
Because I know you sit on that committee. Wonderful. All right, anything else for Mr. Buckholz and Public Safety? Mr. Kinsley? Oh, I'm sorry. All right, thank you, Mr. Buckholz. All right, moving on to the number 12, Public Works Committee Chair Report, Mr. Kinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Schuman. Public Safety Committee met, elected the officers, and Mr. Helwig was last year, our last term vice chair, and now this term is Mr. Peters. Congratulations, Mr. Peters. We had an airport report. They're looking at redoing the runway in 2024. Things are getting put in place to have that done. Maintenance report is, Mr. Hagberg reported that Oasis building is on schedule to be fully remodeled when the time comes that they need it. And the Veterans Building will be coming down shortly. There's a few more wires they have to take care of, pull out of there before that building comes down. Highway Commissioner report that they had to close part of K and Highway 27 for working running culverts. We approved a hot mix plant for paving on Highway K. And we also have a highway right-of-way easement that has to be taken care of, which is a resolution for number 6, or excuse me, C. Letter B, courthouse remodel update. Almost all of us were here tonight. We know what's going on with that. Anybody have any questions regarding that? Letter C, county to convey a highway right-of-way title to the state.
Okay, and that's an
The
action item, sir?
resolution.
Do you, Mr. Alvarado, do you care to comment on that, sir? Or are we just approving this resolution?
I can give a little bit of background. So the resolution is transferring a parcel of land that is held by the county. It's actually held by the county in trust for the state. It was acquired back in 1938, most likely as part of a highway project at that time that was funded by the state. The state has determined that parcel is no longer needed to be held, so they would like to sell it. And they ordered us to transfer it to them so they could do so.
Okay. All right, so at this time, then I would entertain a motion that we approve this resolution, transfer of highway lands to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Mr. Peters. Okay, motion by Mr. Peters. Mr. Buckholz?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Buckholz to approve the resolution, transfer of highway lands to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Kinsley, anything else, sir? Mr. Kinsley, was there a discussion about a possible roundabout in the county? Could you?
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Out on Highway B by the casino, there's discussion about putting a roundabout in. We have preliminary plans from Heather Harrington, and it looks positive that it may be able to fit in there. We have to get a roundabout specialist from the state of Wisconsin to actually design that. So that's being looked into to make sure that it will fit and everything can move forward with that. It'll take a period of time, take a lot of money to get it done, but the steps are in motion to do that.
That should be a safer crossing then, huh? There's a bike pedestrian trail that connects right there and crosses that busy intersection. I'm looking forward to that report. Good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Kinsley. Yes, Mr. Schleter. Yep.
Who's funding this?
Who's funding it?
Yeah.
It's not defined yet who's funding it, but it would have come down to part of Sawyer County and they're gonna be asking LCO to help fund that. And I don't know if there'll be any state funds or not because it's a county road, but that'll be all worked out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kinsley. All right, moving on then to number 13, Land, Water, Forest Resource Committee report. Mr. Betcher.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the committee held its monthly public hearing on Wednesday, May 11th. Elections were held for chair and vice chair. We approved the request for holding the Schwamigan 100 bike race on June 18th. All county and national forest trails are now open. All county and town road bans have been lifted. Storm cleanup has been nearly completed and a number of controlled burns have been conducted. DNR reported no confirmed or suspected cases of chronic wasting disease in our county. LCO reported that fish stocking is in full swing and bear complaints are up. And the bids for the Brunei Dam project have been extended to May 25th. The tree sales are ongoing. Mr. Kozlowski has details if interested. And our year-to-date timber sales are at 575,000, which is slightly below our targeted annual goal of 1.8 million, which brings us to letter B, the timber sale bid approval for discussion and possible action.
Okay. Mr. Betcher, would you like Greg to?
Yeah,
Speak
Greg,
further on that?
I mean, do you want to just give an update on, that was from April 29th on the, because I think we need to have a motion.
Yep.
So,
Sounds like it. Thank you.
Yep, typically, we just approve that committee, but we can do it here too. April 29th, we had our spring bid opening. We offered 26 tracks. We sold 21 of the 26. Our total sold value was just a little over 1.35 million. All of our contractors that had high bids were known contractors we've worked with in the past. So I recommended approval at the committee to accept the high bids. The summary sheet, you can kind of see where we're sitting from years past. So our main products, aspen and hardwood, are holding steady. Hardwood jumped up a little bit. So things are looking good coming into summer here.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Rick. So we did vote on this. The bid total was 1.35 million, and this would put us back on track for our targeted year-end goals. So it was unanimous vote at committee, and I was under the impression that it had to go to full board, but if it doesn't, then
It's your pleasure.
It's here, Mr. Betcher, so let's approve it.
Yep.
okay, then I would ask
Wonderful.
that maybe you entertain.
Entertain a motion, Mr. Hellwig.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, Mr. Buckholz?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellwig, second by Mr. Buckholz to approve the 2022 spring timber sale bid results. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, sir.
Letter C, County Forest Carbon Credit Presentation by Blue Source. I believe they're online.
Okay, and we also have a public comment on this agenda item. Who should go first? They should go first. Okay. All right, Blue Source, are you here?
Excellent. Yeah, Josh Strauss on the line. Can you confirm that folks can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. I have, just as a little bit of background, I've been talking to Greg about this project for quite some time now. Andy, I know from work with him actually previously when he was at Rusk County, but glad to have him on the team as well here now at Sawyer. And I have a presentation that I would like to just present via share screen. So with that, is it all right if I try and share my screen right now?
Yep. Are we good, Alex? We're good, sir.
Okay, very good. Go to slideshow mode here. Excellent. And if folks can just confirm for me that they see the screen, that'd be helpful.
Okay, we don't see anything yet.
Okay. Okay, I think we should probably be in business now. Can people see it?
What do we see there, guys? Okay, yes.
Okay, okay, very good, very good.
Say
Thank
we
you.
see his Facebook.
Okay, so we're good to go. All right, well, I will jump into it. I'm going to try and keep this presentation to about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, so it doesn't take up too much of folks' time, and we have plenty of opportunity for questions. So without further ado, but I'll just talk briefly about Blue Source, the organization that I work for and who I am. I'll talk about our project experience, and then I'm going to get more into the nitty-gritty of what the forest carbon project development process is like and some kind of definitional concepts associated with that. And then at the, for the kind of the finale, I'll kind of bring in what that really means for the county, what we're thinking about in terms of the potential for carbon credit generation, as well as the revenue implications. So with that, Blue Source, so we are America's longest standing forest carbon development company. We have actually now been in operation for 21 years, which is far longer than anybody else in the space. Throughout that time, we've really been a pioneer in forest carbon, working in through a number of different protocols and with a number of different programs, including both the compliance program out of California, but also the voluntary program, which we do much of our work with these days, and which is really central to any public project. So any project on public land. At this point, we have over nearly 90 forest carbon projects in the US alone and several in Canada, and that occupies just under 3.5 million acres. Our team of forest professionals is now 25 strong, 24 of which all have professional forester qualifications, at least a master's in forestry, 4 of which have PhDs in forest-related fields such as biometrics or remote sensing. Over these 20 years, we've partnered with pretty much every different type of landowner out there, from tribal organizations to nonprofits to large timber investment management organizations and REITs. And then really something that I think is great opportunity and is going to have a lot to do with the future of forest carbon is public organizations, like DNRs, counties, departments of forestry, et cetera. So this map gives you a little bit of a snapshot of where a lot of our projects are. As you can see, much of the forested acres around the country, we have experience in those regions. And there's particularly a concentration in this sort of upper Lake States region where Blue Source has about 80% of all the projects that have ever been developed and nearly that many credits as well. So really extensive experience in this area, know the forest types well, know the infrastructure, know the markets, et cetera, and can really maximize value in forest carbon projects because of that experience. I mentioned we work in a bunch of different protocols. Now, just to take a step back, like a protocol is a methodology that's been designed by a third party, in these case, nonprofit bodies that have the sole purpose of really trying to reduce emissions. And so they design the rule sets that allow you to quantify carbon and then generate carbon offsets. Under the current American Carbon Registry Improved Forest Management, or IFM protocol, which is considered sort of top flight in this voluntary carbon space, we have about 40% of all the projects that have ever been listed and have generated over 60% of the credits since the most recent iteration of their protocol, which was the 2018 version. I'd mentioned I'm really enthusiastic about the public space and allowing public landowners to generate revenue from their carbon assets and to think about it when they manage their forests. We really are peerless in this space, working with public entities right now. We at this point are working with 6 counties, including 6 counties, all of which are in Wisconsin, 3 townships in Massachusetts, 2 water authorities in Pennsylvania, the Michigan State DNR. We're in some early stage work with the Alaska State DNR as well, and also 1 public university. Important thing there is that these various different types of organizations, well, the project development process is different with each of them, as well as the contracting process to actually develop a relationship with a project developer and manager like ourselves. So given this experience, it really helps us kind of streamline the process and make sure that we understand the needs of our clients, as well as making sure that we can provide them with the service that they really demand. So with those background components handled, let me just jump right into the sort of what is forest carbon project development and Blue Source as an organization, what would we really be doing for the county and on the county's behalf? And so my organization is really what we would call a turnkey developer, which means we do every aspect of the forest carbon project development process, all the way from the initial analysis based on data that's provided to us, and we do that for free. And then we bring it all the way through to the sale of credits at the very end of the development process. Now, in the intervening steps, as you look down this kind of flow chart here, it goes from 1 to 7, with the first being the project feasibility analysis, which in this case we've already done for the county based on data that Greg and his team were able to provide, as well as our own data sets that we were able to bring to bear. Then after we've already looked at what the likelihood of the success of the project is, we move into contracting. That's something that if the board and the county voted to move forward, we would move directly into that step. And then once that's in place, we would go into designing now we're at the kind of rubber meets the road of the actual project development. The first step is the inventory, where we would design a bespoke forest carbon inventory system, basically set a series of plots across the forest landscape along a grid network so that we got a really accurate and clear view of carbon stocks across the property. And at each of these, there would be a permanent plot installed that would basically be taking very detailed measurements, what I would kind of liken to an academic level of rigor, where we're going to be measuring on a given size plot, maybe a 1/15 or a 1/10 of an acre, every tree to the nearest 1/10 of an inch in diameter, every tree to the nearest foot in height, identifying all the species, doing a subplot to check about regeneration and saplings. We'll be checking standing dead trees for decay levels. We'll also be checking for carbon defect in the trees themselves. So the point is just highly detailed so that we can be very sure about exactly how much carbon is out there in the woods. Once the inventory is done, my team will put together all the documentation required based on the rules of those protocols that we discussed earlier, and also do the relatively intricate and complex forest carbon modeling in order to project out how much carbon will be on the landscape over time. Once all that work is done, we move into the verification, which is a crucial part of this whole process, right? Like, we're not just going to be able to go and say, here's how much carbon's out there in the woods. Here's how we did all these calculations. Now we have these credits and we can go sell them. It's crucial that a third party, nonpartisan, well-certified body come and actually audit the work that we do, both from a desk level where they're going to be looking at the calculations we do, but also in the field where they're going to come out and they're going to actually check a selection of the plots that we measured to confirm that the amount of carbon we claimed is in the woods is actually out there and the data that's going into our models is accurate. Once that verification process is completed, and it involves quite a bit of back and forth with us as developer answering the questions that the verifiers bring. Once we get past that point and they give it their stamp of approval, the registry, that in this case is the American Carbon Registry, or ACR, which, as I was saying before, is a nonprofit body with the sole purpose of trying to help reduce emissions. Then they review all the documentation as well as the verifiers work to confirm they are comfortable with the project. And once they give it their stamp of approval, then they basically serialize each of the carbon units that we are generating and issue them to the project so they can be sold by BlueSource to various partners that we have throughout the voluntary network. You'll see this kind of credit marketing line goes down throughout the process. That I presented that way just because once we've actually committed to doing a project, we can start talking to our vast network of buyers about the project itself to kind of tease interest and get people excited about that project in advance of even the inventory being completed. But once the inventory is done, then we can in earnest really start saying, here's the credits that you can expect to be getting, and we can even try and lock in credit sales in advance of the issuance of the tons, so that the second the tons are actually in hand, they can be sold and a check can be brought back to the county. And that's something that we're often successful with. Part of it is my team. We have an entire section of commercial folks that are just looking at the market and trying to find the best buyer for any given project. So the more time we have to do that investigation and actually have various buyers vying against each other for who is most interested in a particular project, that can lead to higher pricing. Because one thing that is unique in this market compared to some others is that one carbon offset is not equal in value to each additional carbon offset from another project. When a buyer steps in, is interested about one of these projects, they're partly paying for the story and the charisma, what I'll qualify as charisma, associated with the other environmental attributes that are associated with the carbon. So in a forest carbon project, you have potential access to the public for recreation, you have soil quality, you have air quality, you have water quality, runoff protection, etc. So all these things can help really buffer value. This table here, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I know it's a pretty detailed layout, but what it really tries to do is break down in terms of timing for folks to understand just how long these various steps that I showed on the previous slide take. What you see here is, 18 months is about from the point where we start a project to when the credits get issued. That's what we target. Now, there's factors that are involved, like weather or how long the verifiers take and things like that can cause variance, but 18 to 24 months is pretty typical, and what you would expect from the time where you say, okay, BlueSource, we're interested, let's go, to when you can actually receive a check for the carbon value. Want to talk a little bit more about, within all those steps that I talked about before, what are some of the advantages BlueSource brings to bear. We've been developing our own proprietary models using the required equations by the registry, right? So we don't get to invent how to calculate, but we use our own models to most efficiently come to our carbon quantification results, and can, in using those, help optimize and make sure that we're actually producing the highest amount of credits that can be justified based on the protocol rules. As I mentioned, 24 qualified professional foresters. I myself have been working with Blue Source for a decade, and in my career, I've focused solely on forest carbon. I have a background in forest carbon with a master's and in forestry and a master's of environmental management focused on carbon economics. This kind of auto bit, that's just to explain, like in our modeling, there's a lot of pieces that we've made automated to avoid human error. So where, you know, you might be entering in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of data, this can really reduce issues that you have and allow you to iterate quickly. And also want to talk a little bit about just our remote sensing expertise, where though we will be using the really important core data that we pull off the ground, we're able to use a bunch of remote information, including LiDAR that's available, IFSAR data, remote radar information, pretty much anything that we can pull from both public and private data sources to create a richer picture of what's on the ground, allow for more precise quantification, and really help the project be as successful as possible. A bit ago, I had discussed how these credits are bought by entities in the voluntary carbon market. I want to make sure that folks understand the differentiation between the compliance carbon market and the voluntary. The compliance world is strictly, for our purposes in the US, in the state of California. So large emitters in the state of California have an obligation to reduce their emissions and can use forest credits and other offset credits that are approved in the California program to meet those obligations. In the voluntary market, there is no legal mandate. So this is truly voluntary. So the idea is that the large Fortune 500 companies, which pretty much all of them are now involved in purchasing these credits. And, you know, this is just, as you see on this slide, is just an example of a few of the companies that we work with frequently. You know, so the Googles and the Microsofts and the Apples and the Nestle's of the world, they don't have any mandate to reduce emissions. They're doing this voluntarily. They are choosing to go above and beyond and purchase these credits from forest owners for the sake of helping reduce emissions. There's nothing that says they would have to do this. This is above and beyond any regulatory requirement. And you know, so this is just a selection of the folks that we typically work with. We literally work with hundreds of companies, most of which are household names, to try and help them meet their emissions reductions targets. So as a last kind of piece of consideration before we move into like, how does this project look like it's going to perform based on our analysis that we've done up to this point, I just want to talk about obligations, because as folks sit there in the audience, you're probably thinking, okay, well, interesting, but what do you have to do if you're going to participate in a forest carbon project? What's the commitment? And the commitments are pretty straightforward. One, you need to be increasing or maintaining stocking in your forest over time, right? So if anyone intends to be reducing the total stocking on the forest, that's not going to work for a forest carbon project. Kind of the golden rule is that you want your growth to exceed your harvests in any given year. In addition to that, you need to maintain forest certification, which you guys are ahead of the game. You already have dual certification under FSC and SFI. And then in terms of the sort of core management, there are sort of 3 key steps. The total life of the project is 40 years. So it's a 40-year commitment to the American Carbon Registry. And what you're committing to is A, not letting harvest exceed growth, B, having a verifier come, one of those third-party bodies to analyze the carbon across the property, having them come at least every 5 years to confirm that the stocks in the woods are still commensurate with what you've been claiming, having your inventory that you put in place at the very beginning of the project that Blue Source will put in place and have all the monumentation done. And it just has to be revisited on a decadal basis to make sure that you're feeding your calculations good data from updated on the ground measurements. And then annually, you need to report the harvests that go on across the property, so that's taken into account. So it's some pretty straightforward processes. Blue Source as a partner, what we do is, as I mentioned, is a turnkey partner. We really do every bit of this, so it doesn't create additional work for the landowner. That being said, it's not something that would be so arduous that a skilled land manager couldn't take that on once we had established the project well over the first 10 years. Blue Source's typical arrangement is a 10-year partnership with an option to extend after that. So what we like to do, I know it's a 40-year project, and we have no problem with having longer commitments to work with the landowner, but generally most of our landowners have found that they like the idea of, look, Blue Source, prove your worth over this first 10 years. You know, by then, maybe we feel comfortable enough that we can do this on our own and we don't need to involve you. If not, we can extend. So it's a 40-year commitment. Blue Source's proposal is 10 years to work together with an option to continue along. Now I will move from here into carbon and revenue projections, which is going to really, I think, is probably of the highest interest to most of the people on the line here. And if you look here, and this, keep in mind, these dates are associated with the years that the carbon sequestration takes place, not the year that the revenue is brought in. But what we're expecting is a really a sizable project here, with a potentially 1.2 million tons generated over the next 10 years. And given that, we think that given current market pricing, that it's likely to generate $20 million for the county over that time period. Now, that's the end of the day, $20 million. So Blue Source, for our participation, we take 25% of the revenue generated from the sales. We also cover all the upfront expenses. So at no point does the county ever write a check to Blue Source. We pay for 100% of the inventory work. We pay for the verifier. We pay the registry to issue the credits. And that's only reimbursed upon success of the project. If for some reason the project were not to succeed and it were to fail in the first year, Blue Source would eat all those costs. We have 100% of the skin in the game, and there would be no obligation for the county. But once we do bring the project into success, that and revenue is distributed, that's when the obligations kick in for the remaining 39-year period. Want to be sure that folks understand that though we're only talking about the first 10 in this table, the project would still be poised to generate another 1.8 about million tons over the next 30 years if they continued along in the in credit generation under the ACR program. So that's kind of the punchline. I think that one other thing that's interesting to note is that when I presented to the Forestry and Forest Resource Committee in March, the pricing was lower than this. We've had what is really an awesome success with the American Carbon Registry recently, where my team had been working with their folks and petitioning for the ability to break out sort of different types of carbon within a given project. Specifically, and this gets a little bit in the weeds, but specifically, we are able to differentiate between carbon from new growth on the property versus carbon from existing standing stocking when the project began, and they have different values. All this is, needless to say, is just that with the differentiation, we can get different pricing for those various products, and ultimately generate really premium pricing. So we're showing here an average price in the first year of about $19 per ton. What that can be thought of is like sort of some tons will sell for in the $15 range and some will sell for the $25+ range, but this is an average number that we're looking at. So with that, I want to take a second and move into questions. I'm sure that there are a few out there, and yeah, just happy to pause there. And Greg and Andy, if you have anything you want to say too, that by all means, please jump in.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Righeimer.
Yeah, so this is a forward market that we'd be looking at. And as you said, the pricing has gone up since you originally looked at it. Are we at some point locking into that sell price on a 40-year deal? And if so, is there a way to split that up into a portfolio approach, I would call it, where you could, I'm just making this up, 80% you fix in, 20%. Is there a way to float the market, would be my term. By that, I mean,
no, I hear you.
The credit market may go up over time, and maybe we'd like to have that opportunity to, take advantage of that versus selling everything at one time.
100, absolutely. And actually, this is why I think that the way that this model is designed between Blue Source sharing revenues with the project owner, it makes everyone's incentives really, really well tied. So the idea is the last thing we want to do is pre-sell all these at a low, at a low price. What we want to do is try and feel where the market's going. And we have, a group of, at this point, 12 different people who are solely looking at this market, trying to know exactly where they think it's going to move. And what we will do is try and ride that market to provide the best value to the client. So for those 10 years, that's our projections, right? That's saying where we think things are going to go. We're not saying by any means that you're locked into that. What we will often do is say, okay, we've got a buyer who wants half of 1 year's credits for X price. Let's take that, and then we're gonna hold the others for a little bit longer. Someone may say, look, I want to buy the next 5 years of credits in entirety. And we would say, well, if we want to entertain that offer, we want to see an escalator and the pricing for those 5 years. So it's pretty nuanced, and we can get very sophisticated with the different agreements. But needless to say, we're certainly not going to just jump into a flat 10-year deal with somebody.
Okay, Ms. Hessel.
Why the 40 years and why Wisconsin?
So the 40 years is an interesting time period because it was arrived upon by that American Carbon Registry, right? That, like I said, the nonprofit, because after convening a large working group of folks from academics and nonprofits and experts in industry to try and figure out what they thought would be a long period of time for a commitment, but not so long that it would prevent forest owners from acting. It was in reaction through the Climate Action Reserve. So that's another one of these registries out of California that require a minimum of 100 years. There was a lot of difficulty getting landowners to participate at all because the thought is like, look, I'm going to be committing to a certain type of management that goes far beyond my own existence here, and that ties up other generations. And while there's certainly a great carbon benefit to that, the problem that we were finding was that if you can't get people to act, then they're not engaging in the program, and then there's not meaningful carbon impact now when it's most important. So the idea is, it's philosophically what the ACR want to do is motivate folks to say, I can commit to this 40 years. It's a meaningful amount of time, and I'm going to start dealing with climate impact today, as opposed to deferring because I can't commit to the 100-year period. So that was some of the thinking, and it's really evolved over the 2 decades that this market has been in place. And as far as why Wisconsin, it's really all over the country, right? So Wisconsin has a great forest industry, so that's one of the reasons why you're seeing forest carbon in Wisconsin. And you may say, in addition to why Wisconsin, why county land in Wisconsin? And I think it's fairly unique. And the counties in Wisconsin have some of the largest forest ownerships in the country. They also have a history of, really thoughtful management. And like I was saying, with already having FSC, already having SFI, like the ability to kind of at that management level understand how carbon can come into play and be a helpful resource. So I think that's why it's kind of taken root here.
Okay, Mr. Betcher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Strauss, for the report. So you've identified that we definitely have a product here that's in demand, in higher demand. So it is a seller's market. So I know you've been around a while, but there's more and more carbon credit brokers showing up, and some of them are offering lower commissions, much lower than your 25%. And also they don't require the 40 years of sequestration. Some offer half that. In fact, there are some companies that offer 5-year and even 1 year. So having said that, and we have like I said, we have a valuable product here, and we know that we have 115,000 acres of county land. So my question is, why should we go with Blue Source?
Sure. And so that's a totally valid question. I would say that offering a certain amount of commission is one thing, and offering a different commitment is another thing. But at the end of the day, what is the total value it's going to bring back to the county? And there are programs that have a 1-year commitment. There are programs that are getting started that are considering a 5-year commitment. Those products aren't going to generate the same amount of revenue per unit offset as the well-established, basically gold standard product that the ACR credit generates. Additionally, I'm confident that the value Blue Source is going to go and be able to get in the marketplace will more than justify the percentages that we take as a partner. So I would caution, because I know that right now it does seem to a certain degree like there's a bit of a carbon gold rush going on. And I think, and I've seen it myself, there's a lot of folks who are very novice here claiming to have, you know, real chops in this that don't, and they're trying to get in with a sub, you know, market percentage here just to try and establish themselves. And, you know, the clients that they work with initially are going to have to suffer the growing pains with them. But in terms of the program itself, I really do think that the product that you're buying is different, and buyers in this marketplace, if they see that someone is committing to a 1-year program, are going to look askance at that. Whereas many of the buyers that see that you're doing a full 40-year commitment understand that there's some real permanence there. The other thing that is crucial about this program compared to some of those other shorter ones is that there's that much more confidence and veracity in the measurements, because we actually go into the field and do the detailed forest carbon work, and we layer on remote sensing, we layer on you know, measurements that are done from satellites and flyover by planes. But ultimately, there's nothing that can compete with understanding what's on the ground by having those boots on the ground plots, which is required by this program. So, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces there, but, and I appreciate the question is a totally reasonable one, but that's how I would respond.
Okay, I have a question. And Greg, can you come up to the mic, please, sir? Greg, did Blue Source respond to an RFP we did, or are they the only game in town?
We didn't put out an RFP, but this came through both the County Forest Association, and this came from Mr. Hoff through the Administrators Association that they presented at.
Okay.
And so once we got the connection, we went that route. So,
Kind of like a preferred provider or vendor then, correct?
I guess, yeah.
And then a question for you, Mr. Strauss, is the 25% that Mr. Betcher was talking about, is that negotiable, or is that kind of your going rate?
We try to be as consistent as possible with our rates for our clients, but every project is different, and I'm absolutely open to negotiation. It's, you know, that's one of the things where we base our rate upon total size of the project, complexity of the project, the amount of heterogeneity in the forest, topography, all these things go into account. But, you know, that being said, I want to make sure that everyone's happy with the agreement, and I'm happy to, you know, consider different structures.
Okay, is there any further questions from, yes, Mr. Peters?
Mr. Strauss, you did I thought, a very good job of presenting your material, but it's relatively hard to see on the screens that we have here. Is there any possibility of receiving a downloaded copy of this presentation?
I have provided the presentation to Andy, and he should be able to distribute it to folks. I will encourage folks that, you know, there's always a fine line here with, this is a public context, and I want to make sure that people understand the project, but also there's proprietary information within the presentation that I would request that folks on the board who received this material would just keep that within the confines of the board discussion. Just because, as has been pointed out, the last thing I want is for a bunch of folks who don't know how to quantify carbon in this space to take, here's what Blue Source projections were, and then go try and, you know, back calculate and use those to make estimates for, you know, for other purposes. So I'd prefer, you know, if folks could just keep that in mind.
Okay, Mr. Schlueter.
Yes, thank you. I have a few questions. First of all, at the end of 40 years, I mean, we've still been using our forest land, our 115,000 acres. At the end of 40 years, you know, assuming no natural catastrophes or something, will our forests here in Sawyer County still look about the same as it looks now?
In 40 years, your forests will have higher stocking than they do now.
in 40 years?
Yes.
It'll have
Higher, yeah, so there will be, the forest itself will have higher amounts of biomass. The trees will be larger, the total amount of carbon in the forest will be higher than you currently see. So this is about ongoing forest growth.
okay, and that's because of the way the forest is managed?
Well, it's a combination of the way that the forest is managed and the natural growth, right? So the idea is that over this amount of time, the forest is going to be managed in a way that it never cuts in any given year more than what grows. So inherently, every year the forest has a little bit more biomass than the year before.
Okay, I understand. And you said this helps lower emissions. I'm confused here and a little concerned. Industries buy these carbon credits and use them to offset what they are doing? Or am I missing something here?
That's correct. So this, again, in the voluntary market, right? So this is folks who don't have any legal necessity of doing anything to address their emissions. Folks in that marketplace are willing to pay landowners to maintain and increase their forest carbon stocking. The key thing here that needs to be understood is that this amount of carbon that's in the forest is not guaranteed without this carbon project to remain there, right? The forest right now has a bunch of optionality as to how it could be managed. Now, we're not saying that the county needs to give up managing the forest altogether for forest carbon products. It certainly will still have a balanced forest carbon and forest, and forest, timber resource program. But it will be saying that even if markets were really hot in the timber area, they're not going to be able to increase harvesting such that now they're actually reducing stocking across the forest landscape. So it really is a commitment by forest management and by the county saying that for this next 40 years, we are going to be maintaining a very sustainable harvest program and in fact, increasing stocking. Whereas in the absence of the project, there would be the opportunity to actually reduce stocking if the county had chose to, if financial pressures had been such. The good thing is that the carbon revenues are designed to fundamentally relieve those financial pressures, thereby, allowing the forest to continue to grow and at the same time providing for county financing.
Okay.
One more, please. What I was getting at, I guess, is these volunteer companies, they hang on to these carbon credits. What are they getting in return?
So what they're,
Okay, if it's good PR, I understand that entirely. But at some point in the chain, somebody is being allowed to pollute the environment. Is that right or wrong? I mean,
so all of these companies, for every ton of carbon dioxide equivalent they claim, for every one of these units that they purchase from a county in Wisconsin, they get to claim a 1 ton reduction in their total emissions footprint, right? And so that is, it's not like they had to do that or going to get any reward from a state or anything like that for it. It's simply so that they can say to their constituents, to their shareholders, like, look, we're doing what we can to reduce environmental impact. Now, all of these organizations, for the most part, try and reduce as much as they can internally. And then when they, as a necessity of your, developing business processes, new R&D, trying to figure out how to get to a lower and lower net footprint, they go outside of the bounds of their business to buy what we call offsets, where they finance other landowners or other types of projects to make sure that carbon remains in the woods or is sequestered over time. So the idea is the reason they reap this benefit is because the county made the commitment that because they're participating in the program, that carbon is guaranteed to stay in the woods and is no longer at risk of being harvested at a level that it could have otherwise be for financial gain in terms of timber, which would have led to a release.
Mr. Strauss, we're kind of going over our time here, but I do have, is there anyone else Mr. Hellwig.
I just want to know, the voluntary companies, are they the only companies that so you would sell to? Not these other companies that are required to do this stuff?
Well, the required companies couldn't use these credits to meet the requirement. So yes, it would only be companies in the voluntary marketplace. Though I will say the credit value is commensurate. So you're not selling for any less than the compliance market sells for.
Okay, Mr. Bissonette.
Okay, the question I have is, if I understand this right, in order to comply with the program, the growth has to exceed the timber harvest on any plot. So the question that I have, what happens in the event that we have a forest stand that's in the program, it suffers some kind of natural disaster, gets wiped out, so you have to clear cut it because it happens frequently around here. Or worst case scenario, every year there's different invasive species that can wipe out stands. And so in that particular case, the harvest would exceed the growth. And so what do we lose credits on that particular grid of forest?
It's a great question. It's a crucial part of the program that I'm glad that we can address that here. So first of all, it's not on any, when you say growth has to exceed harvest on any particular plot, that's not the case. It's across the forest area. So across the entire footprint, growth has to exceed harvest. So in a given area, it doesn't mean that every single plot has to have more growth than harvesting in a given year. It's the aggregate. But more importantly, if there is what we call a unintentional loss event, so that's anything that is connected to natural disaster, pest infestation, really broadly, like it could be fire, it could be wind damage, it could be ice damage. All of those are accounted for by something called the buffer account. And what that is 20% of all the credits that are generated, approximately 20% of all the credits that are generated by a project do not get to be used and sold by the project itself. They're held in an insurance pool to cover off against just those types of events. So the idea is we know those things are going to happen. That insurance pool protects you against those events when and if they do occur. And that's already built into the tables that I had shared. So all the cost estimates and all the revenue includes that insurance pool already being taken out.
Okay, is there anyone else? I know I'm going to get to you, John, 1 second. Anyone else that would like to ask a question? If not, Mr. Righeimer.
Yeah, who's our credit risk with? When the money is, we're getting paid by you, we're getting paid by the company you brokered us to, or who?
You get paid by
who's
Blue Source.
backstopping it?
By Blue Source.
Sorry?
By Blue Source.
So Blue Source would be our credit risk. You would capture the money and then we'd be relying upon you staying in business to pay us.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. And I do have one public comment on this agenda item. And Ms. Joan Cervenka, state your name and address, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joan Cervenka, and thank you for the public opportunity to speak here. Welcome new members, and welcome to our experienced board people. Myself, I have over 33 years working for the Forest Service. My initial work was Stage 3 silvicultural inventory in the mountains of Idaho, and I ended with permit bureaucratic oversight of implementations such as major pipelines through the National Forest. I was a professional bureaucrat. I have written letters to each of you. Thank you. Thank you for reading them. It's okay to go slow. It's okay. Environmental disasters have significantly happened. We have records on the National Forest back to 1938. Regularly, environmental disasters happen in northern Wisconsin. The silviculturalist over at Hayward today gave me some real shitty news. The ash borer, the EAB, is here. It's in Moose Lake area. We got a lot of this stuff going on. One of the things that I'm really, really excited to hear your questions. I'm really excited to hear you question Josh or Jesse, the Blue Source person, and it's really important. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Thank you. My letters state my position on this. I don't think our county land should pay for somebody else's pollution, but whatever happens, please go slow.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, Mr. Betcher, I appreciate this presentation. I'm glad we got to hear this. I'm considering then, or thinking that it's going back to the land, water, forest then, before it would come back to us for a action item, correct?
I hope so.
Yes. Great. Okay, is there anything else for Mr. Betcher or Mr. Strauss on the carbon credit presentation? Yep, Andy, go ahead, you bet.
Yeah, just to reiterate that, that was the intent of tonight was to get the presentation out so you could hear the information and take it back to the committee then. If you have any questions, comments, things that you think of before the next committee meeting, please let a member know, Mr. Betcher know, and we'll address them.
And Andy, can you get that presentation to all the supervisors,
will.
please? Okay. All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Betcher.
I was just going to say, that completes my report.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Strauss.
Okay, thank you everyone for your time. Really appreciate it and appreciate the great questions. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to number 14, Health and Human Services Board Report. Mr. Schluter.
Thank you. At this month's meeting of the Sawyer County Health and Human Services, first order of business was to choose a chair and a vice chair. I get to be the chair again, and Mr. Betcher is our vice chair. He has stepped up to the plate and is willing to help us. Excuse me. Here it is. We have several new members, so we've started a educational orientation series. We started last Tuesday with ADRC. Each of the departments are going to be presented to us on what they do, how they do it, what their issues are, what their needs are over the next few months. Senior Resource Center came before us. They were the recipients of a grant, Alzheimer's Family Caregiver Support Program. And they, knowing that if they got this grant, they would not be able to do the work themselves. So now we are, through a memorandum of understanding, paying Sawyer County with the grant money to do that work. So that's what I would like to have a motion on approving. It came from Health and Human Services. Jesse, did we have an actual approval or did we just send it here tonight?
No, it needs to be voted on.
Yeah, but did we send it here with an approval, with a request for approval?
Yes, I believe so.
We did,
Yes.
okay, that was the meeting before where we did something different. Thank you. Yeah, so the
Can
Health and
I-
Human Services,
Can I make the motion to
Sure.
approve that?
please.
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Betcher. Oh, you already did, okay. All right, I got a motion by Mr. Betcher to approve the resolution designating an Alzheimer Family and Caregiver Support Program agency to Sawyer County. Ms. Hessel.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Hessel. Okay, is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Mr. Schluter, anything else, sir?
We had the regular department reports. Really, that's it for my report.
Thank you. All right, moving on then to number 15, Finance Committee Chair Report. Mr. Kinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had elections. The vice chair is Mr. John Bigmeyer. Thank you. We get a treasurer's report showing the sales tax, which is always good information for us and continuing going up. Over last year, it helped us out a lot. That's important things. We talked about the ARPA funds, and we finished with ARPA funds because we have a request where our new administrator is going to bring back some ideas for us. We talked about the 2023 budget guidelines that go out to the department heads and then get back into the committee so we can set up the budgets for the coming year. We talked briefly about carbon credits, and we also talked about getting someone to do grant writing for us. We talked about there's opioid settlement coming in the future, and that'll be continuing being brought forward. Our administrator will probably keep us abreast of that also. We do have one item of letter B, resolution to designate fund balance. And I'll ask Mr. Keith to come forward as his last action as our county accountant to take care of that for us.
Thank you. Mr. Keefe.
So you have in front of you a resolution to designate some fund balance. Looking forward, there's the possibility of having some financial obligations, especially in the Health and Human Services area with the out-of-county placements. So we just thought it would be best at this time to maybe designate some of our undesignated fund balance and designate it towards Health and Human Services for those future costs. And then the other item on there is designating some funds for the future for the Resource Development Program. We've kind of hit that program in the last 3, 4, 5 years, and we thought it was maybe important to reestablish some of the funds in that particular fund.
So, Mr. Keefe, this resolution then designates 2 pots of money into fund balance, correct?
Yeah, we're designating them as
Oh, yeah.
fund balance versus
One-
leaving them in undesignated.
Okay, 1.3 million and then 300,000, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so then at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution designating these funds to general fund balance. Mr. Duffy.
I move.
Buckholz.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Mr. Buckholz to approve the resolution to designate these funds to the general fund balance. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Helwig.
I just have a question. The out-of-county placements, are those like mental health?
Yeah, or they could be a juvenile area too. It's not just mental health, but largely.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Kinsley, anything else, sir? Yep, thank you.
Schumer,
Mr. Buckholz,
Can we take a break?
you want a break?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, we'll do a 5-minute, 8-minute recess. 5 to 8-minute recess. Okay, we are back in session. Are you, Mr. Kinsley, have you completed your Finance Committee report, sir?
Yes, right before the break.
Thank you. Okay, number 16, Economic Development, UW Extension Committee Chair Report, Mr. Duffy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met on May 9th. We had a pretty spirited meeting, but no action items to report. We did have an election and John Ringheimer was the vice chair. We welcome him on board. And we then heard from the University Extension on their summer agenda. We also heard from the Hayward Lakes Visitor Convention Bureau, and they gave us a report of their self-evaluation of their strengths, weaknesses, and future opportunities. We also heard from Northwest Regional Planning. They gave us a report on the loans made in Sawyer County, and that currently there are no delinquencies in that loan package. We had a report both from the Hayward and the Winter libraries and their summer programs. And the Winter Library reported that they're having some structural problems with their building, and they're engaged in a fundraising effort to try to cover at least some of those costs. Then we heard from the Berkey, and after 1 week of registration, there are over 3,000 entries. They expect to have 12,000 by race time. And the Berkey is installing new bleachers in the Lumberjack Bowl. That's under construction now. It'll be done early next week. Then for the fall trail run, the half marathon will be the national championship this year. So they expect a large crowd. That, Mr. Chairman, concludes my report.
Great. Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments for the Economic Development Committee? If not, thank you, Mr. Duffy. Okay, moving on then, number 17, County Administrators Report. Mr. Andy Alvarado.
Yeah, I think the report that's report packet from our summarized first few weeks.
Turn your mic on, please. Yep. Okay.
The report in the board packet pretty much summarizes my first few weeks. We spent a lot of time with Mike getting up to speed on the finances, and we do have a new finance director coming on board July 1. So think we're in a good position, and Mike's gonna be in touch with us over the next month and a half to make sure things go smoothly. Mr. Buckholz mentioned the CJCC. I'll just update a little bit on that. CJCC does have a subcommittee set up to discuss the use of the opioid settlement. There's still more details coming out about the opioid settlement. Expect to hear something in the next few weeks, actually, though, on the final amount that the county will be getting. At the present time, it's still intended to be distributed over up to 18 years. We should get a distribution schedule. However, as I've mentioned, there is discussion on the counties association level about a mechanism where the money could be received up front, and then probably a lesser amount, but in order to get it put to use a little sooner than getting the piece every 18 years. The subcommittee has talked about the need for additional treatment and initiating a conversation with other counties in the region about doing something on a regional basis. CJCC also is discussing the future drug court that's under development with the TAD grant to the Department of Justice. And then maybe just to backtrack a little bit, to do a little bit better job. So the county does contract with a tollless law as our corporation counsel, rather than having in-house counsel. So Andy Phillips that spoke with us earlier. We refer matters to him, procedural issues. Of late, it's been a lot of some open records things and zoning procedural issues. Has a couple other attorneys that work with him, but yeah, we use them to help. Ideally, we spend a little time and money with them up front to prevent larger issues coming down the road.
Okay.
That's my
Is there, Mr. Alvarado, what is the option to fill that gap in our construction project?
The options you have would be, as has been brought up, you have the ARPA funds, which could be used, you have your general fund, or you could borrow, fill the gap with a state trust fund loan or additional bonding. I think those probably are your three primary sources to fill the gap.
You agree with that, Mr. Keefe? Okay. All right, any questions, anything from Mr. Alvarado on the county administrator's report? Oh, yes, Mr. Duffy.
When will Mike's replacement appear on the job?
July 1.
Okay, and we're able to get by okay from now till then?
Yes, I think we've got some pieces in place. Mike is not cutting the cord completely, so we have access to him. The biggest things coming in the next month are the audit, the 21 audit, and he's prepared information for that, and we'll be in touch with the auditors when they get here. And other than that, we'll be leaning on existing staff and getting through for the next month and a half, yes.
Okay, good. Anything else from Mr. Alvarado? If not, oh, yes.
Did we ever hear back from the attorney regarding the ARPA funds for the
Yes.
donation to the Civil Air Patrol or whatever that was?
Yes, specifically to the Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol is I guess I say an approved entity that the county can provide funds to, regardless if it's ARPA or otherwise, as long as it does work, is based here and does work in the county. So it is eligible for ARPA funds or donation.
Was that something that the airport was going to discuss, or is that a county issue again?
I believe the intent is to put it on the next Public Works Committee and discuss how it could be funded. Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Helwig. That does it? All right. Thank you, Mr. Alvarado. Appreciate it. Okay, anyone else? No. Moving on to number 18, we have a resolution that was brought forward by 2 county board supervisors. And we would need a 2/3 vote to discuss this resolution, and then we could move to an action. So what a 2/3 vote is what, Mr. Alvarado? 10. So at this time, then I would ask my 2 supervisors that brought this forward for a motion and second for discussion of number 18 resolution.
I'll make a motion for discussion of this resolution.
Okay, motion by Mr. Betcher. Second by Mr. Schleter. Okay, motion to discuss. Madam Clerk, we'll take a roll call vote, ma'am.
Ms. Hessel? Yes. Mr. Weaver?
No.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Duffy?
No.
Mr. Fetcher?
Yes.
Mr. Sleater?
Yes.
Mr. Schuman?
No.
Mr. Mainstreet?
No.
Mr. Rust?
No.
Mr. Righeimer?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsley?
Yes.
Mr. Buckles?
No.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Bissonnette?
No.
Mr. Savitsky?
Yes.
Motion fails. So what you got?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to number 19. Correspondence reports, matters for discussion only. Anyone? Yes, Mr. Kimball.
Mr. Chairman, I think we owe Mr. Keith a round of applause for the one.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to come up here and talk. Yeah, yeah.
No, I just want to say that I've been here 6.5 years, came in shortly after Tom. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here, getting to know the people of Sawyer County. I don't live in Sawyer County, so meeting a lot of new people. I've enjoyed the job. I've enjoyed the employees I've worked with, the committees I've been on, the county boards. It's just been, a really good way for me to end my career. And in a way, I wish I was staying, but I know it's time. So, but you'll do well. Andy, I really enjoyed meeting Andy and getting to know Andy these last, month or so or whatever it's been. You're in good hands with Andy, and I'm confident with your new finance director. I'm not sure if we can share the name yet or not, so I'm not going to say the name. Mike, yeah. He's coming from a school district, so he's familiar with, the accounting is similar. The accounting language and guidelines are a little different. It's going to be a learning curve on that aspect, but the accounting is similar. He's familiar with grants, and so I think it's just going to be a good transition. And I do, like Andy said, I am auditors coming in. I am going to come back and help out with that a little bit. And when Mike gets here, I have offered to come back and help him if he feels he wants some help. So, yep, thank you. Thank you.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. I know it was a long meeting and we had our groundbreaking and all of our things that go with that.